Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and listening. And we have Larry on his mountaintop with his spy glasses on. Hi, Larry. How you doing tonight?
Oh, Stuart, I cleaned the lenses off those glasses, and I can even see further, so it's good.
It doesn't look too good over there in the Middle East. Nothing is being said over here that I could see. Have you seen anything on Fox News about it?
No. One American News has small captions of the ongoing troubles in the Middle East and the Internet, but as far as mainstream media, it's a total joker. It's a total joker card, and even Fox is avoiding the issue.
Wow. The last word I had, 9,000 people were rioting at the Gaza border. They had 110 injured. Now, that may be much bigger now. 40 were shot as explosives and grenades thrown at the IDF. Tanks opened fire with their machine guns. So this calm that they were trying to broker, I guess, with Egypt fell apart, which you and I both thought that it probably would. But this is getting extremely serious. Here's an analysis. Hal Turner put out what he thought was going to happen, and this this is what he said. I just got quite a phone call over my analysis from an incredibly high-ranking official in the government. It turns out that Iran wants to draw Israel into the Gaza Strip, then unleash Hezbollah and the Golan forces. Iran is running this show, and they are running out of time. Once the economic sanctions cause oil shipments to stop, each day Iran gets weaker and poorer. They must start their war with Israel before the oil sanctions kick in, or they're going to lose their chance to destroy Israel forever. That is what this Gaza nonsense is all about. That is why Netanyahu is not allowing himself to be drawn in. He hasn't lost his nerve. He's got courage like steel. Apologies to Mr. Prime Minister and to the others as well. Anyway, he says, I got it very wrong in what he thought was going on. What do you make of that analysis? Isn't that pretty much what we had thought, possibly?
Yeah, this goes along with what we were thinking that was happening. And I know Netanyahu's got a lot of trouble on his hands, but he's smart enough to know and not be duped. And that's exactly what Iran is trying to do. But the interesting thing is, Stuart, I'm wondering, Iran's got a limited time, a limited lifeline, if you will. And where do you think Daniel 8 might click in?
Well, that's what I'm kind of afraid of, because these sanctions are brutal. And the other thing you have to consider with Iran, they've got a homegrown revolution going on. So not only do they have major sanctions, but they've got a revolution. Now, knowing how people that are in power will do virtually anything to stay in power, the only option they would have, as far as I can see, is either they acquiesce to Trump or they go to war. What other choices do they have? And they just fired off a missile. So that kind of tells you that they're giving the finger to Trump, and they intend to fight it out, I would say. And you know, they have been saying they have to get rid of Israel. Psalm 83, I think it is. let us drive Israel into the sea and be remembered no more. They have been making those kind of threats for a long time. How do I want to word this? How do they get the approval of their people and stop the revolution? My guess is they go to full-scale war. Daniel 8 would be my guess. And the only argument we have is Isaiah 17, which is a very rapid, very fast battle. Does it come on the heels of Daniel 8, or are they both kind of together? In other words, this could be considered one big war in which Iran goes out in all directions, but Israel also fights at the same time and takes out Damascus. Because in Isaiah 17, it more or less says that Damascus becomes a ruinous heap. Well, it is already, but it's going to be far worse. And it implies either massive conventional bombardment or a nuke of some sort is unleashed upon Damascus and literally destroys it. And if you read down Isaiah 17, that kind of indicates that all the Arabs leave their cities because evidently they think they're next in this scenario. What do you think? I mean, this is my take on it. This is all being orchestrated. I'm very, very suspicious of this whole thing because you remember that Trump and Putin got together, Bibi and Putin got together, Iran and Putin got together. All these leaders that are kind of involved in this kind of mix that's going on right now got together, and a couple of days later the war starts. And that's just kind of suspicious to me. But then that's my conspiratorial brain operating. What do you think? I mean, I'm looking at this whole thing, and it looks too orchestrated to me. And to the average person, It wouldn't be orchestrated at all. To the average person, they just think, well, here we go again. Israel's at it one more time. And anything new from the UN or anybody saying anything about this huge mess that they've got on their border?
Oh, no, that's, the UN would be for that. And what's interesting, though, Stuart, is the fact that we keep being, or I should say the U.S. keeps being sidelined with this North Korea situation, and they also seem to be part of this mix, if you will, including China, who just fired on towards one of our surveillance flights, shockingly, and announced that that man-made island was China, and we had no right to be there and had to leave the area immediately. You've got China and you've got North Korea. Of course, Russia's back in North Korea. And so really it seems like this is all building towards some type of scenario. What do you think?
Well, I think it has to, I don't think there's any question we're going to war. It might settle down for a little while, but it's not going to settle down for much longer because everybody's running out of time. It's kind of interesting that this senior official said that Iran's running out of time because of these sanctions. Well, we got Turkey in the mix now because Turkey and Russia both said that these sanctions that Trump is doing are actually an act of war. That opens a whole nother doorway for world war. Once this thing gets unleashed in Israel, if they really go after it, or let's say Iran attacks, I don't see where Iran has much option anymore. They're going to lose face if they don't back up their belligerent rhetoric. And launching a missile more or less puts a punctuation mark at the end of their rhetoric that they are ready for war. And then you have Soleimani, who said, I'm just waiting orders to take Israel out. And who knows, again, you and I both remember and I can't remember if it was 10, 15 years ago, reading an article where Iran had detonated a nuclear weapon. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I certainly do.
Yeah.
Do you remember that at all?
I do remember that.
So they probably already got them. So this would mean that this thing could escalate rapidly into a whole new scenario that nobody is expecting at this point in time. And then we have that little deal with Kim where he said, maybe we should unstable the Korean Peninsula. I'm sorry that Trump is taking the tack that he is, and it's going to wreck the stability of the entire peninsula. It wouldn't surprise me now if he fires off another missile. And we have that Asian fellow who had that vision, who said that, as I reported, I think, on the other show last night, that, and I've always thought that North Korea has far more weapons and far more advanced technology than we have even considered. And I say that simply because both China and Russia have, developed all these kind of hypersonic weapons. And who knows what Kim actually has. And China could tell Kim, you be the fall guy, and we're going to stay out of it, at least as far as the public's concerned. And so Kim, in defense of Iran, if we go after Iran, and it sounds to me like Trump is going to go after Iran, if these sanctions don't work, and I don't see how they're going to work, other than to force Iran into a war, which may be the strategy that Trump is hoping for. Because then he could kill two birds with one stone, or at least that's what he thinks. He could take out Iran, Daniel 8, and help Israel. Israel could take out Damascus and settle the Syrian question, and everything starts over again. And we don't know where Ezekiel 38 and 39 actually fall in that scenario. I don't think it's very far along before Ezekiel 38, 39 kicks in, because it's the Lord says, I'm going to put hooks into the jaws, and I'm going to turn you around, and I'm going to bring you forth and upon the mountains of Israel. And at the same time they're upon the mountains of Israel, it says that Gog has an evil thought. I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, to them that are at rest, to those who have gotten rich in cattle and goods. And that's the United States that he's talking about. To go up means to go over the poles and take out America. And if I was a Russian general and I was going to attack Israel, I would take out America, or at least neutralize America, so they couldn't come to Israel's defense. So I think we're looking at the scenario of the beginning of World War III. And who was it? You probably know this vision better than I do, of Henry Groover, where he said when the fighting in Gaza breaks out, did he not say that was the beginning of the Great War?
I think he indicated that started the situation with the UN, and they didn't meet in New York. They met in Geneva, was it?
I think it was. Yeah, you're talking about the excursion, probably into wiping out the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to me that the Security Council in Israel met. And was it all the ministers agreed to go to war? And Netanyahu vetoed it and said no. What do you think the situation is there, other than getting bogged down in the south?
Well, I think Netanyahu knows exactly what Iran is planning. The Mossad has a incredible spy network, in Iran anyway, underground, and if they didn't, they wouldn't have never captured all the information about the Iranian nuclear program that they got and brought out of Iran. So, and matter of fact, one of the scientists that was working with the Syrians on some of the stuff they were doing recently got blowed up. Apparently, they're blaming Mossad, but apparently, his car blew up with him in it. So there you go. So there's assassinations that are happening at the same time. And, of course, here in America, isn't it odd? We don't hear any of this. I mean, America is just so brain dead as far as news.
I don't understand why they're blocking this. Usually they cover it, but for some reason this whole thing is being blocked. And it makes you wonder if Trump isn't in the middle of this and is squeezing Iran, hoping possibly that they'll try to go to war and then just take them out. Because Daniel chapter 8 more or less indicates that we do, according to the rabbis that have studied Daniel 8, says they think that the he-goat is America. And it travels by air. This is an air assault. I mean, Trump's not stupid enough to put troops on the ground, or at least not a lot. And so it appears that this is an aerial assault and maybe part of the end time, where we scoff at kings and princes and pay no attention to any of them. We decide to go in there, I guess, and maybe settle that equation or attempt to, kind of like Hitler's final solution. And if this is what they've got going, we got to be right on the threshold. And here we are coming up on the latter month, actually, of the 70th year of Israel's statehood. And if you look up the number 7, it's kind of spooky because it more or less indicates completion. It's over. And there's a lot of 7s that are showing up in this whole thing. So it does make you wonder. Got any other news on the Syrian situation? I know they were building up a lot of troops. And maybe that's what that guy was referring to, that they're going to blitzerig attack on Israel if they can bog them down on the southern border. 7, completeness, spiritual perfection. So here we are at the 70th year. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Soleimani, which is running the Iranian movement and most of the Syrian and Iraqi region, has had a plan all along that they were going to mount a massive missile attack on Israel, one so big, thousands and thousands of missiles to where they couldn't defend themselves. In other words, they would be their systems, Iron Dome and Joshua Sling and all the other missile batteries would be overwhelmed and just couldn't defend against a number of missiles. So that's been the plan. And, of course, Iran was going to set this out and just watch all the missiles coming out of Syria and Lebanon and Gaza, and that region. And so, that was the plan all along. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting, too, you said, wonder where Trump is in all of this, in this mix, because I caught a thread of information coming out of the Middle East that said that Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi prince, literally had ordered an invasion of Qatar, and they were going after Yemen and going into Qatar, and Trump stopped that, and not yet. So somebody's holding off Netanyahu and somebody's holding off Salman, and all of this that's being held off is either an attack on Iran or its proxies. So
it would make sense to coordinate. If Saudi Arabia is in the mix of this thing, which it appears to be, then it would pay to hold it off until the big event. But it appears like this Palestinian thing along the border, that could escalate very, very rapidly into a huge war. I mean, what are you've got the Palestinians, Hamas, or whatever. What do they do? Eventually, you come to the point where it's all or nothing. Go big or go home. Go big and do your thing, or keep your mouth shut and just go home and try and work it out. And it doesn't seem like there's any working out, and I'm very amazed at the UN. Usually in these kind of mixes, the UN jumps in almost immediately and calls for an emergency council meeting and for a ceasefire. I haven't seen anything about the UN in any of this. Why do you think that is?
You want to know why I think that is? I would
Yes.
have to say that the only time the UN jumps in to stop a confrontation is when either the U.S. or Israel is about to win. That's what I think.
Well, that's true. And if they're gathering, all these little ceasefires they have is just for rearmament, and then they continue on. But I wonder just how long Bibi Netanyahu can hold off if his own people are being hurt. I mean, killed in some cases. If you're not going to defend your own citizens, you run into political trouble real quick. So this thing, it could accelerate very, very rapidly. And there's a prophecy, I referred to it once before, of this Asian guy who said that he was told by the Lord, you have to take these things with a grain of salt, that North Korea would launch. Well, if we got into a war with Iran, and Iran and North Korea are buddies, it makes total sense that Kim would launch, and we could lose some cities, which is what this guy said. We're going to lose some American cities. And they have such advanced technology, he claims, that America will not know exactly where they came from. Once they figure it out, then they launch against North Korea. But by that time, we're in ruins, or at least some of the cities are in ruins. And all of that is going to get blamed on Trump and his sanctions and what he's doing. I mean, I can just see how this thing's going to play out if we get involved in a war, even if it was just Hawaii that was hit. And let's say no city was hit, but he's going to get blamed for it. And they're already attempting to impeach him. So I can see where this thing could spiral out of control very, very rapidly, and I'm concerned simply because of where we are on the timeline and the 70th year. Not that it necessarily is going to happen that way. Maybe nothing happens. Hopefully they settle all this down and not one thing occurs. But it just doesn't look that way, and I feel something's in the wind. I've felt that for a long time, that a lot of this is going on with Mueller and all this other stuff is just a sideshow. There's something else is being done behind the scenes that leads to the New World Order, martial law, the elimination of the Christians, et cetera, those that are left. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll tell you what, I've been reading some more on this Mark Goodwin and some of his books. And matter of fact, I mentioned that on a number of shows and posted it on my blog, and I'm getting some responses back from people that have bought some of his books and started to read them, and this is really, really good stuff, because he embeds a lot of scripture, and he really lays out scenarios that are interesting. Matter of fact, one of his scriptures I was reading in a book today, it was talking about the previous president of the United States. In the book, of course, it was somebody using a different name, but nevertheless. But anyway, he quoted John 8:44, and he said, "For there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language." for he is a liar and the father of lies. And I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I know who that is. You know, we talked about him coming back, matter of fact. And another thing that was quoted in Mark Goodwin's book here, I'll read you a little quote, because in here they have a guy named Paul Randall who ran for president, and he won, but the guy that was in office tried to assassinate him, and he's in hiding in the book. However, listen to this. This is something that concerned me a little bit, and get your point of view on it, because we know about the deep state. We know the Republicans, the rhinos, and the Democrats, and we know they had a plan, and they haven't changed it. But listen, he just says something simply. He makes a very interesting statement. He says, you don't build a police state unless you intend to use it. What do you think?
Absolutely. That's what the UN whole thing, the Agenda 21/30/50, is really all about. That's why the surveillance state is increasing rapidly right under everybody's nose. I got a call this afternoon, and I haven't gotten the material yet, but he has analyzed G5, and G5 and CERN are connected, and they're going to use G5 to make the final breakthrough. And I would think they'd probably be connecting all the other colliders in the world together. And remember, China's building the largest collider ever. There's a lot of stuff going on among the rich men of the earth. It's like Donald Trump's space fleet. I mean, we've had a space fleet, as I've said, for years now. We've had that going on. This UFO thing has been around for a long, long time. And the anti-gravity backwards engineering is true. That's what we did. And we have aircraft like the TR-3B. We have what Dr. Peter Bader called the cosmospheres. Those are those cigar-shaped things. We have gigantic space stations up there that are cloaked and invisible. In fact, there's a kid, by the way. Have you seen those pictures that he's taken? I think he uses infrared or something. And there are huge space stations up there.
Yeah, I've seen some of the photography that he had. He had a lot of problems, though, because they were continually trying to bring him down.
Yeah. Well, it's like Barry Rothman. You said he had a new code out. Have you got any information on that?
No, I don't. But if while we're talking, you'd go to his website, you can find it real quick. It's brand new on current events. I think it is.
Okay, let me look.
Yeah, because Barry has run some incredible stuff lately, and this was a furtherment of that. I mentioned it today, but I was on overload as far as information today, and I didn't get to write or make my notes.
Okay, let me look it up. 18 current events. See if anything pops.
Should be right at the top, a brand new one. It's under construction.
Will primitive life on Mars stop Elon Musk's colonization plans? That's kind of interesting.
We can't get away from Mars,
and then we have former President G.W. Bush official makes claim that trillions of dollars are illegally transferred to fund a secret space program. I think the latest figure was $21 trillion. And you remember when Rumsfeld couldn't account for, I don't know how many trillion it was? He just couldn't account for it. They didn't know where it went.
And remember a lot of it they tried to blame on the Pentagon.
Yeah, they've had this for years. And I think a lot of this technology they intend to use, if I'm reading what Stan Deyo had to say, was to try and defeat Jesus Christ at his return, which is kind of ridiculous. But, you know, insanity is what insanity does. And, how do I word this? If the Creator is behind everything that you see, feel, touch, He can dissolve any weapon they can make. And they're weaponless, and they're going to be totally defeated. But this is what insanity attempts to do. However, any weapon that they make is going to be turned upon the human race, whom the elite hate with a passion. They intend to kill as many people as they can. Georgia Guidestones, they're not there for no particular reason. That's engraved in stone. And they intend to reduce the world population by a huge amount. Billions of people have to be exterminated. Well, there's a number of ways that, of course, they can do that. But this primitive life on Mars, is he talking about insects? Okay, here's the words. Colonize Mars, life, Elon Musk, methane, which is the indicator of life, nuke, whatever that means, express, maven, and lake. He says it's under construction. He says the Torah code seems to indicate that we, in particular Elon Musk, will colonize Mars, but the government may use the increasing knowledge that there is life there as a reason to try and stop him. Now, this sounds so bizarre, but if you go into what's showing up, where some of these officers in the military who have gone into this 20 and back program, and then you go to the movie Starship Troopers, it's eerily the same. They're up there fighting different insectoids. And now I know that sounds bizarre, but I'm not sure why. If you're following any of this stuff, a lot of the sightings of so-called alien creatures involves insectoids, the praying mantis being one. What do you think about all that?
Well, I've seen one. And a matter of fact, remember Richard Shaw's images that he was given by Dr. Lear, and while he was still alive, and the image was of a UFO, over Turkey that was filmed, and when they actually viewed the window of the craft, everything inside the craft was going faster in time than everything outside the craft was going, and they slowed it down. Richard Shaw slowed it down in his studio and found creatures, and even a mantis-looking creature and others inside the craft itself, along with humans.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that kind of verifies what this 20 and back people are saying. They're getting some of their memory back. They erase their memories when they come back. And it's just kind of interesting that all of this is seemingly now starting to come together. And maybe some of this stuff is going to be unleashed upon a very unsuspecting human population. I'm sure you've heard of some of the visions and dreams of even young children where we are really going to be attacked by what we could call very strange creatures, hideous creatures that are going to destroy. And then we got the giants as well. That are going to be unleashed, according to Isaiah. He said, pray rather that the giants don't be released, but the human race has become so apostate, so evil, that there's no way that the Lord is not going to release these people or these giants. And Klaus Dona, who was that Russian scientist again that Klaus knew? That actually saw these giants in stasis?
Ernst Moldeshev.
And if I'm remembering that right, he couldn't get too close to him. I guess some Tibetan monks or whoever took him and showed him where they are. And they are kind of in suspended animation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They're not dead, but they're not alive. It's suspended animation, basically, is what it is. And there's a force field that surrounds them, according to Moldeshev, who went in there to look. And even the monks, if you got too close, you had a stroke. So your brain would burst a vessel and you would just simply die. You couldn't get too close. Even the monks couldn't get too close. So, we're asking people to, we talk about things that people think are way, way, in outer space, but they're not all out there. They're right here. And people just don't have a clue. Matter of fact, Stuart, you remember I sent your Project Red Star to Moldashev in Russia. After that,
yes.
My computer came under horrible attacks. I mean, man, they hit me. But I did get a message back that Moldashev was extremely impressed with your Project Red Star, and especially he was intrigued with the reconstruction, if you will, of what is in those images. I mean, because he did some of the same work, with some of the stuff he found.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's pretty obvious in Project Red Star. It's up for free, by the way, folks, if you want to go to Angel Fall 923. And I don't know exactly what link it is, but if you click on Stuart Best or whatever, you'll be led to that page. And Project Red Star is right there. And clearly we're up there. I mean, there's no question about it. Unless you're in total denial, we are up there. And who we are with is a good question, I guess. But things are a lot further advanced than we realize. And a lot of things are going to come down in a big, big hurry. And I think that's why last night on the show I did a quick deal on sudden destruction. We are headed towards a sudden destruction. It says, "For yourselves know perfectly well that the day of the Lord cometh as a thief in the night." Well, a thief comes at a time you don't expect. For when they say peace and safety, which they're saying all over now, world leaders said it at the UN, sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child. They shall not escape. We are virtually at the door of all this, and then Jesus, of course, used the term snare. For as a snare will it come upon all them that dwell upon the face of the whole earth. So there's something coming. There's something in the wind. And with all the stuff that's going on in Israel, we got to be very, very close. You remember that old woman who, I think she was like 90 years old, and this pastor went out to visit her back in, I think, in the 60s. And he wrote down what she claimed the Lord had showed her. And he stashed it away. He thought it was so ridiculous, but he didn't throw it away. He just put it away. And about 20 years later, he dug it out, and only to find out that everything she had said had already come to pass. And what she said was, the church is going to be taken out just before World War III breaks out. And that's kind of an interesting thing in view of where we are. Now, I know an awful lot of people don't believe in a pre-trib or at-trib removal of the church. They think it's mid-trib or in the middle of the trib or wherever. Some people, of course, insist there's no rapture whatever. We go through all this. You got to really twist Scripture around to show that. The blessed hope of the entire church is to be with the Lord Jesus Christ. And why would he make war with his own bride? Unless he's a real sicko, and there's no way you can claim that. So that kind of eliminates the fact that he would make war with his own people. So he's going to either hide them or he's got to remove them, don't you think? I don't know what your particular take is on when the rapture occurs. I know there's a lot of argument about the temple, and Antichrist has to walk in the middle of the temple and all that, but there is valid argument that that's not being interpreted correctly. So it's like everything else. They argue and debate and argue and debate and fight and kill each other, and, what do you think?
I think you're exactly right. The rapture debate is a rigorous activity, and I mostly assume that if you're going to get into that debate, eat well before you start, so you don't starve to death before it's over. But I tell you what, my personal opinion is that the Creator will actually take His people when He wants to.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, isn't it astonishing that the Creator says that that Jesus don't even know the second He's going to appear, that it's all in the Creator's hands, all the time. And so
yes.
It probably the best kept secret in the universe and beyond, and we all try to figure it out sitting on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, maybe. But I'll tell you what intrigues me so much, Stuart, is the hidden scriptures. I say they're hidden not because they're really hidden. They're there, but everybody that reads over them. And that's the ones that talk about, pray that you be hidden. What's hidden? And then again, when I look at some of the dreams and visions and experiences that I have had and talked to the Lord about, there's something. I mean, I'll just have to say there's something out there that is way beyond what we can imagine, and it's going to occur when it occurs. And it'll probably really be a big surprise, I would assume. And very possible that it's not as many goes as they think will. But, that's not in my hands anyway. But, yeah, I believe there's something the Lord's going to do and protect. He's going to watch over His people. He's going to take care of them. He's going to protect them. But, of course,
that's what He says.
I'll tell you what. Let me share this because I'd like your opinion on it, okay?
Sure.
I got an email from somebody the other day that I get emails from on a spiritual basis just on occasion when the Lord deals with them about something. And I was given a code word for that. And this individual said that they believe that they were shown that because so many of God's people are out of order or out of alignment, are really not where they're supposed to be right now, and I mean even physically. In other words, maybe in the middle of big cities like New York, Chicago, et cetera.
Yes.
There's a lot of the Lord's people that's simply not listening. They never think it's going to happen where they're standing, and so they never make preparations to not be standing there. They're so out of order that this individual believes the Lord assured her something is going to happen that is going to shake these folks that ought to be somewhere else, and suddenly they'll know they're supposed to be somewhere. And I'm not talking rapture. I'm talking a natural movement where people sure better get out of the way quick.
Yes.
And, I'm not going to enlarge on that, but that's just something somebody was dealing with me about that I thought was really important, and it seems to be a spiritual matter that, the Lord's people ought to wake up to. And you and I have shared with people, you better be ready and you better be prepared and just don't dream on, but make yourself ready. We're to stand, Stuart, until we get different orders from our commander. But when we do, we got to move.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. There's a ton of people. They make all kinds of excuses. Well, I can't leave the middle of the city. That's where my job is. And really what they're saying is I don't trust in the Lord to provide for me. And He will, but you got to step out on your own in faith. The power of faith and the power of prayer are the essential parts of all this. And people will not step out in true faith. They just don't believe. And Jesus kind of chided people. He said, well, look at the lilies. They don't toil, they don't spin, and the Lord has given them better than Solomon himself. It's a lecture on faith. And all a person really has to do is go look at the natural world of animals who operate solely on faith, that they're going to be fed and whatnot. And under usual, normal conditions, that's the way it works. Obviously, we're coming up on a time, however, when things are starting to go haywire. And thousands upon thousands of people have already tasted of what I consider to be swats from the Lord, trying to wake everybody up. But he's going to have to take a 4x4, I guess, aside the head to do it. And you always run the risk of killing people when you hit somebody in the head. So, but we are in a bad time, and the signs are just everywhere, all over the planet, with Israel being at the center of this whole thing. That's why I'm very, very concerned about what's going on in Israel right now. Yeah, we've had flare-ups, but there's a lot of other stuff going on that's dovetailing in to Israel. And that, of course, one of the big ones was this new law that they just passed, which is directly connected to the temple being rebuilt and to the Sanhedrin coming up into full power. And it's right in our face, and people are just not seeing it. And then we have the embassy moved, and we had Jerusalem being declared the capital. The only thing left is a peace agreement, and it looks like we're going to have war before we have peace. And I was reading something where they're all ready, I guess, to go with this peace agreement. And Abbas said, no way, he's not going to have anything to do with it. More or less saying it's my way or the highway. And it said that America was going to go ahead with it, irrespective of what Abbas or the Palestinians or anybody else thought about it. Have you heard any more about Kushner and that group?
Yeah, they're very, matter of fact, that's why you haven't seen them on, any of the, I guess you could say USA News, because they've been busy working with, and this is interesting too, because they're working with Mohammed bin Salman about this Middle East thing and this agreement. It's very interesting, and along with your timing, Stuart, here we are. We're on the cusp of, if there is a real Mahdi, the 12th Imam or whatever they call him, that's going to be delivered by the Iranian Holocaust or whatever. We've got to be in the time frame, because also we're in a close time frame of Antichrist and so many other things you've already listed. I had talked about possibly that the Lord may do something to shake his people up that are in the wrong places. And if they stay in the wrong places, they're not going to survive. But he may also provide, as we're seeing it as an example, I call it sometimes God's M.O., if you will, from my law enforcement days. It's a, modus operandi is another term. But we've seen God over and over and over do a shake in Israel or a shake in the Middle East, and then there'll be a delay that we cannot explain. And then later we'll see that a lot of military movement occurred during that delay. Well, we may see the same thing in the spiritual realm, so to speak, is something happens here in America where a lot of his people are living in the wrong places that gets their attention, and he may give a short delay for them to get out of the way. So, enough said about that, but I just want the Lord's people to be aware,
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because the Bible indicates that the Israel people have to go back to Israel. And part of that new law was to bring them back. Now, probably one of the only things that could bring them back would be a total economic disaster, and they would flee back, or we have a false flag or something of that nature. Something is coming that's really going to shake up the world, and they'll come back. They'll be fleeing to get back in there. In fact, people are migrating back already. I know some people that have said that they're moving back, and they're not necessarily Orthodox Jews per se, but they are heading back to Israel.
Well, even Stuart, even Mike Huckabee, you're aware who he is. He ran for president but nobody wanted a Christian for president, did they? So anyway, Mike Huckabee recently, I've been following him closely. He's been in Israel, and he's been investing in Israeli industry, and he's also been hunting a house. So there you go. I mean, we're seeing in the background a lot of movement already beginning to happen, and I'm not talking about everybody going to Israel. I'm talking about a lot of Americans are in the wrong places, and some of them need to get out of harm's way before some of this begins to come down. But then again, we may have to have as you said, the catastrophe or the disaster, whatever it is, to cause us to do that, to cause any of us to do that. And I throw all of us into the dump.
Oh, yeah.
We just need to be where we're supposed to be at the correct time, and that's difficult.
Yeah, and, I've been warning people for years and years to get out of the cities, but so far very little movement in that direction. Now, I understand why, and I understand the reluctance, but sooner or later, Isaiah is very, very clear about what's going to happen in the cities, that mischief is going to arrive in the cities, and it's going to be very, very bad. When I was flying for the General Electric Company back in the 60s, I was flying, Washington and all around the place there, and it was really something to see, very sad to watch the smoke rising when all those riots were taking place. In fact, it got so bad that the FBI came out and advised they thought corporate airplanes were going to be the next target because of the status, and so they armed everybody. Kind of interesting. And it's going to happen again, but it's going to be a whole lot worse than what I saw.
Yeah, let me give you a new...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, let me give you a new heads up, too, on somebody that's already done that. If you'll remember, Dan Gordon, and we all know Dan Gordon, especially from his books of warning that came out of the Middle East and also about the America's southern border that is going to be breached by the enemy. He has warned and warned and warned, and it hadn't done much good. And now Dan Gordon has left Los Angeles, L.A., and he has went to the, I guess you could say, middle of nowhere. So when you start seeing people with the savvy of Dan Gordon and others that are leaving and going into rural places away from the cities, something is coming.
Yeah, there's something in the spirit. I mean, you can just feel it. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't tell people what it is because I don't know. I can just feel there's an event. I'm going to call it just an event. Something is coming that's going to rattle the cages of the American people. Now, how they're going to react to it, I have no idea. If current behavior is an indicator, they're not going to do hardly much about it. But they're watching their entire nation go down in the middle of a communist coup, and they're not doing hardly anything about it. And it's just too bad. I read before some of the things from the protocols, but let me read it again just to educate everybody that's not aware of them. Abolition of ordered or national governments. In other words, get rid of them. We're going to have everything at the UN. Abolition of all private property. That's already part of Agenda 21, Agenda 30/50. You won't be able to own your home. All your land will be taken. They don't believe in private property. It's right in all their writings. The abolition of inheritance rights. Well, Trump is trying to reverse that, but it'll be anything that Trump has done, they will reverse with a stroke of a pen. And I'm talking about Obama most likely. The abolition of patriotism to national causes. That's what they're trying to do. The abolition of the social order of families. We're right in the middle of the destruction of families. The abolition of marriage That goes along with Bible prophecy. There will be no more marriage. They'll probably split up any marriage there is. The abolition of all sexual codes or conduct of laws. So in other words, get rid of all that. Well, that's part of Codex. That's kind of an interesting thing. I'll have to get into that later. The abolition of all religious beliefs that are based upon God. The centralization of all credit. The establishment of a one world government. The establishment of a one world economy. The establishment of a one world religion based upon the deification of man, humanism. Well, that's all being done. It's all here already. And most people are totally not aware of it. If you look at the Communist Manifesto, it all falls into place. And we're very, very close to that, don't you think, Larry? I mean, that's just my take on it.
Well, I think probably closer than we really want to know. And what's interesting, too, is the fact, Stuart, and I'd like your opinion here, because Donald Trump, not from the White House particularly, but from his campaigning, if you will, which he does probably twice a week to crowds, he's warning. You hear this warning over and over and over. If anything happens to him, they're coming in and they're coming for your guns, and it's over. And what do you think, Stuart? Is that a real warning?
Absolutely. The Rothschild Manifesto, communist. Law is force in disguise, so use law wherever you can. Political freedom is an idea, but it's not a fact. Use liberalism, the progressives, to obtain control via gradualism. And that's kind of where we are, folks. Governments are to be destroyed by either external war or internal. Liberalism and corruption means. We must get control over all government economies. There's your world economic system. The end always justifies the means. Force and might equals right. There are no absolute moral or ethical codes. We have the right to reconstruct all existing institutions. What are they doing? They're knocking down all the statues. They're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to eliminate history. In fact, they have, as far as schools are concerned. They've infiltrated all the schools, and they're rewriting the history. And it says here, the power of money must remain hidden and secret until we are in such a position of power that no one can stop our plans. Well, that's where we are. Trump can't stop this. We must use alcohol, drugs, sex, pornography, vice, and all moral corruption to destroy the youth of the nations. That's what they've done. Our youth out of the colleges are all communists now. That's why they don't want anybody from the conservative right to even speech on their on their campuses. So here we are. What do you think, Larry? I think we're awful close, and this is only part of it.
Yeah, it is so close, and the thing that has betrayed America seems to be mainstream news. What before would warn you about a takeover is now part of the takeover. Total propaganda every day, 24/7 in America.
Yes, they are the media arm of the communists at this point. It's amazing to me that mainstream news, including Fox, will not use the word communist, and this is what it is. It's a communist takeover. The United Nations is a communist organization. It is the beast of Daniel, fourth beast of Daniel. It's what it is. It's doing exactly what Daniel the prophet said it would do, but most people don't even know who the beast powers are. Anyway, good night, everyone, and thanks for listening. Thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. And hopefully, if anything really breaks, we'll have a flash update, so stay tuned. It's hard to get out there now. Anyway, good night.